We were both living in Altus. I was working as an auto mechanic in one of the shops down there, one of the dealerships. We started dating come October of 2001, so about 3 months later. She is performing in a play, and I went out riding motorcycles with my buddy, and was coming around a bend. We were riding up towards Quartz Mountain Lake down in southwest Oklahoma. Coming around a bend, leaned over, hit some gravel, lost control of the bike. Bike flipped over, landed on my shoulder. Then I landed backwards over a guardrail, ended up breaking my back. When I came to underneath the guardrail, I couldn't feel anything from mid-chest down. I'd grown up in church, grown up in a very traditional church, and one of the things I struggled with, even up to that point, was struggling with issues of doubt. I'd rededicate a lot, and just always had that in the back of my mind, like, am I really saved? Have I made that commitment? Am I good? And go back and forth. And one of the things that day did for me, I remember hearing God's voice tell me that you're going to be okay, and I felt this peace. So the ambulance came and got me. It took about 30 minutes to come get me, 30 minutes to make it back to Altus. By the time they got me to the hospital, my blood pressure was 60/40. And at that point, my family and Stacey came to the hospital. When they got there, found out that I had broken 2 vertebrae, damaged my spinal cord, and then also ruptured my spleen. And so that's why my blood pressure was so low. And so they got me stabilized in Altus, did emergency surgery to fix my spleen, and then helicopter evac'd me to Oklahoma City to OU Medical, where I did they had my back surgery about a week later after all the swelling went down. But the prognosis was that I probably wasn't going to be able to walk again. I was probably going to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair.
From the beginning, it was like I knew, he was the one for me. And so I had been praying for quite some time for a husband and just gone round and round. And then to think that, like, when I was in the hospital, it was like, what's going on? Like, I just met the man I'm going to marry, and now he's not going to make it. No, that's not going to happen. So, I just started proclaiming the word over him. You'll live and not die, and proclaim the word of the Lord. His work was very good to him too as well. He was really blessed because they paid.
Yeah, they continued to pay me while I was in the hospital, and made sure that my insurance was covering everything. My total hospital bills, when it was all said and done, was close to $500,000, and I ended up only paying like $33,000. So we were really blessed.
God is good. He totally took care of us.
My spinal cord was swelled up from the damage, and there were pieces of bone fragments that were pushing into my spinal cord, and so they couldn't do the surgery until those either pulled out or something had to happen.
I remember that they were like, if we go in and do it, then you could
completely lose all function.
Yeah, and so we prayed, and then that
shortly after that
just kind of came out.
It backed out. In my back surgery, they fused together about 4 to 5 vertebrae in my back. So I've got titanium rods and screws and plates and all that stuff in my back. But like I said, they didn't think that I was going to be able to walk again. So from the hospital, they transferred me to physical rehab at Jim Thorpe in Oklahoma City. It was basically learning how to walk again, or learning how to function again. But they were also preparing me for life in a wheelchair, and so half of the time I spent doing physical therapy. The other part of the time I was doing occupational therapy, so learning how to transfer from a wheelchair to a bench and a bathtub. It was frustrating. That was one of the hardest. It was one of the hardest periods of our life. I know that was where it really cemented our relationship. I met guys in physical rehabilitation as well that their wives or girlfriends had left whenever they hit the hard times like that. So I knew I was really blessed to have her. But it was also, that time was one of the most faith building for me, because I didn't have anybody. I had her to fall onto, but I didn't have anybody else to really rely on, and so it was just me and God. When I had my accident till now, I've never really had doubts about whether I'm not saved or a child of God, and that's been one of the best reassurances I've had. just knowing that God's there with me, watching over us. I knew I couldn't be an auto mechanic again. That just wasn't going to be a possibility. And so through a program called vocational rehabilitation, they were able to pay for me to go back to school. I was going to be go back to school to be a science teacher, retrain. So I moved to Norman. Stacey was still finishing her degree in alto. She was working on her associate's degree in music. Yeah, it was that fall that I proposed to her.
We got married. I transferred to OU. We've been at OU. My last year in college, we thought this would be a perfect time to start trying to have a baby. And we didn't really know that it was going to take us 8 years to have her.
Yeah. Whenever we were trying to have our own, have a baby, we'd have that roller coaster of emotions where we would try. We thought maybe she was pregnant. We didn't want to take a test yet.
Or I'd take the test and it'd say no, and then
And so it was that up and down of trying to get our hopes up and expectations, praying, believing, and then that we're not pregnant, and then kind of do it all over again. And so we just quit trying. At this point, I was still using a cane, and so it was pretty obvious, like when I came in, like there's something wrong, I'm not walking right, I'm using a cane. We got to talking about that we'd heard lots of stories of people who adopted or did foster care, and then that took the stress off of them actually trying to have their own, and they would be able to conceive. And we really wanted to go into foster care looking to partner with someone, be a support system, not just to help the child but the parents as well, or parent. And we talked about, like, if we had the opportunity to adopt, then we would. And so the first child we had a 4-year-old boy named Jay. We had him for 4 days, and during that time they had contacted other family members and arranged for him to go stay with other family members. And so the second child that they called us about was a severe special needs student that had
just breathing problems. He had to be on a respirator, and he had breathing. And I was a teacher, and he worked, and both worked, and I was like, I can't take that child and if something happened to the child in my care, I would just no. Then they told us about Nicholas.
We met with the biological parents, and so when we met them to talk, so they could visit Nicholas, they straight up asked us if we would be willing to adopt him, and we said yes, and because we'd kind of already fallen in love with him.
I fell in love with him the first day he arrived. We were doing fertility.
Yeah, we had started fertility treatments, and we'd started doing visits with the doctor.
We had tried and it didn't take. We had tried again, it didn't take, and then it was the third time, and we were like, we don't have money to keep doing this. So if it didn't take, we were just not gonna try again. And then that third one was the one that took.
So February,
we found out that we were pregnant with
2014
with Jewel.
Yeah, and so that was huge for us because we'd been praying for so long.
It was surreal. It was just like, it was just, I took the test and you're on cloud 9, but then you're like, is this really happening? Like,
Jewel her due date was in November.
We already had an ultrasound that said she was a girl. So I talked to my doctor, and she's like, you can't have another ultrasound. Your insurance only pays for one. I was like, but told her about student care. So she's like, sure, we'll do another one. And when we did the second one,
they thought they saw fluid
around her heart. And so they sent me to another a specialist down here in Norman. That's when they noticed that
They noticed her blood pressure was high, and she had a lot of protein in
my urine, which means that I was mild preeclampsia. I didn't want any intervention, like no medication. I wanted to try and just go all natural.
And the doctor said no.
Yeah. I wrestled with the Lord and talked to him, and just was like, okay, I trust you, and I trust that the Lord is, in control, that he can move her heart one way or the other, and that it's not the doctor that I'm placing my trust in, but the Lord.
And so we go in, and they induce, and they try a few different medications that don't seem to be working well, and they try a couple other things. All said and done, it was a 47-hour labor. She had Jewel naturally, But whenever Jewel was born, the doctors were amazed because when she came out, she had a double knot in her umbilical cord in the same spot. So two knots, and right on the same spot.
And my doctor had never seen it other than in textbooks. And so she was like, "Can I take a picture?"
But the thing is, like, they didn't ever pick that up on ultrasound or anything. If we wouldn't have gone to the first ultrasound and then they picked up on her blood pressure,
the second ultrasound
and picked up on her blood pressure and preeclampsia, then we would have never induced. She would have gone full term, and most likely that knot would have grown tighter, and she probably wouldn't have made
lost her. I'm sure if they would have known, then I would have had a C-section.
But I mean, it's again God's providence, watching after us. So October 21st, Jewel came into our lives, and so now we're trying to figure out how to do life with 2 kids. But one of the key things that we've seen just throughout our story is just God's hand. In the moment, we didn't see it, but when we look back on it, we really see how God has directed our path and then protected us from things, just different things that if it would have gone the way that we wanted or we planned at that moment, then we wouldn't be where we are now. We wouldn't have the kids we have. We wouldn't be in the community we're in. And it's awesome to see how God directs our paths and takes care of us in every step of it. And it's one of the things that, even though we've had lots of struggles, and it was a lot of heartache waiting for Jewel, and then just a lot of heartache dealing with my injury and things like that, even though it feels sometimes like He's not there, He is always there, and He's always looking out for us, always providing for us and taking care of us.